is this lawyer?
Roxanne.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order. My apologies, I jumped up for a second. Do you want to go around and introduce yourself to all the board?
Hi, I'm Mike.
Mike, Ron Wilson. Good
Ron,
to meet you.
nice to meet you.
Mary
Mary, how do you pronounce your last name?
Petlichkoff. Don't worry, it took me 6 months.
Nice to meet you, Amy Shellis.
Hi, Dawn. Nice to meet you.
Mary Lane.
Marion Bazin.
I'm Joe. Same here.
So, good evening, and on behalf of the Board of Education of the Dearborn Public Schools, I would like to welcome Mr. Ron Wilson to the interview for the position of superintendent. Mr. Wilson is formerly the superintendent of Howell Public Schools in Howell, Michigan. I want to take a minute to describe the format for this evening for you as well as the members of the audience. Introduction to the board members, which we've already could check off. The interview may take up to 90 minutes. Questions submitted by the audience if time allows. There'll be approximately 25 to 30 questions from the board. Toward the end of the interview, we'll give the candidate an opportunity to ask the board questions, and we will provide an opportunity for the candidate to make a closing statement. And Dr. Wilmot, our search consultant, will keep us aware of the time remaining. The audience feedback and questions from the audience may be submitted on the green forms right here. They're over on the table here. The board will consider these comments questions if the form has been signed. The questions are not duplicates or illegal, and if time permits. The task of choosing our next superintendent is a responsibility of the board as representatives of the community. However, we appreciate and seek input from our staff and community. While we are not seeking recommendations as to which individual should be hired, we are seeking your input as to the strengths and/or concerns of each of the candidates. Please keep in mind that these issues we may not use as a basis for our hiring decisions. They are printed on the bottom of the form. Dr. Wilmot will collect these forms when we begin and the last section of the questions, which will be staff and personnel. So I'll start with an opening question just to get us started. While we've had the opportunity to review your resume, our audience has not. Would you briefly review your background and tell us what causes you to be interested in the position at this point in your career?
Absolutely. May I introduce my wife and daughter?
Absolutely.
My wife Elizabeth and my youngest daughter Anna are with me tonight.
Thank you for joining us.
Elizabeth is the love of my life of almost 35 years. We have 3 children. 2 are married, and we have 2 grandchildren. So, I began my educational career at Eagle Village, working with emotionally impaired juvenile delinquents in a residential treatment facility. Taught vocational readiness and was part of a collaborative team that worked with kids and actually developed treatment programs for them. From there I went to Mount Pleasant High School, and I taught building trades and math. I was there for 6 years and got bumped to technology education, which was charged with starting a new program. I was there for 2 years and applied and received a job in Harrison, Michigan as the middle school assistant principal and special ed director. And I was in that position for a little over 5 years, and the principal retired, and when the principal retired, they promoted me to middle school principal and curriculum director. And if you've ever worked in a smaller district, you know you wear a lot of different hats. So I was in that position for about 6.5 years, and attended the Michigan Leadership Institute Superintendent's Academy in 2005, and in 2006 applied and was hired as superintendent and business manager for Cass City Public Schools. And some real interesting experiences there. I inherited the deficit district. They didn't know it, and I actually discovered it 2 weeks into the job. And so we worked through that. It took us a year to work through it, but it was a great learning situation. And then I was there for a little over 4 years, and I was approached and asked if I would have interest in applying for the Howell Public Schools position. And was in Howell for almost 4.5 years. And the reason I'm interested in Dearborn, my first interest in Dearborn was when Superintendent Wilson received the Superintendent of the Year award. And I knew Brian from MASA functions, and having lived in this area, actually in right between Garden City and Dearborn until I was about 5 years old, my memories, of this area were much different. And so when Brian received the award, I went on the website, your school website, started poking around and looking at all the things that you guys had accomplished. And I was just amazed. It was my perception and reality were not the same. And so I looked at the relationships, with Henry Ford, College, and the relationships with the community and the strong parental support, and it became very evident, why Brian was recognized and the work that he has done collaboratively with the board and the community. And so I kind of, as time went on, last summer I called Brian shortly after the ACT scores came out, and I could see we were using a program called IDEX Focus, which is a benchmarking program. And so because we bought the program in Howell, I had the data for every district in the state, and so I was looking to see who was making great gains. And so I reached out to Brian. I said, Brian, what are you guys doing? What can you attribute to that? What's the positive deviance that's going on that's causing that to happen? And he was very quick to share 2 or 3 things that he thought that were making a difference in that area. And then in November, I parted ways with Howell, mid-November, and IDEX, this company, this benchmarking program company, hired me. And so I've been calling on superintendents. And so when I saw Brian was in the running for the state superintendent of the schools, I thought, it's probably a pipe dream, but I would really love to be in Dearborn. And anyways, when the posting went up, I looked at it and wasn't sure, given how I parted ways with Howell, whether or not I would even have an opportunity to interview. And so I'm certainly thankful for that. But that's kind of probably a little bit longer than what you wanted. But that's how I became interested, in this position.
So given what you know about our school district, could you tell us what you believe is our most immediate challenges?
I probably have an unfair advantage because of my position with IDEX, because I have all your data, and so I've had a chance to scour your financial and academic data, because that's basically what I've been doing for the last 6 months for districts around the state. And I think that there's certainly, academically, you guys are doing very, very well. And if you do the benchmarking I was talking about and look for districts that have similar demographics, or even buildings that have similar demographics based on free and reduced lunch count, based on the size of the building in terms of number of students there, you're able to identify buildings around the state that are dealing with very similar populations. And overall, Dearborn's doing an incredible job, but there are some areas. I noted your students that are economically disadvantaged. That gap, I think some attention should be paid to try to close that gap. Your students with disabilities, although you guys are doing, you have a nice trend line going. I think there's some ways that could be looked at and dealt with. The other thing too, and I really haven't had a chance to spend any time with your curriculum, but some of the trends, lead me to believe that it's either one of 2 things. It's either an instructional issue in some areas, or maybe it's a curricular issue that needs to be aligned. And and then beyond that, on the financial side, with a $185 million budget, I'd like to see a little bit more fund equity. I think that would be something. And I don't want to do it at the expense of programs and kids, but anything below 10%, you're looking at having to borrow every year, to stem the tide till your state aid comes in October. So those are real pressing ones that I would see, and I really had to hunt, because I knew you were probably going to ask me that question. So I really had to hunt to find some things that I thought were issues. So.
What specific capabilities and/or qualities would you bring to this position that would set you apart from other candidates?
Well, I know the candidates you've interviewed just by name only, so I don't really know much about them. I do know that I use a very similar leadership style to your current superintendent, and that's a balanced, management type style. And when I first became aware of that, when Waters and Marzano published that white paper from McCrell, had a chance to dig into that, and there's 21 points, there's 21 facets to good quality leadership, and it's interesting, and I didn't know until I read Brian's bio that that's what one of the things he was doing here, and so it speaks volumes to the ability to work with people and bring people together and help establish a vision, and move a group towards that vision. So I think that sets me apart. I think that my leadership style is such that they're never going to hear me raise my voice unless I'm yelling to watch out or heads up. I'm very very approachable. I think that my leadership style is such that people know that I like them and that I want to do what's best for the organization. So.
We're going to take turns
Okay.
with the questions, so Ms. Bazzi's next.
The first group of questions are relating to community relations. How specifically have you engaged diverse populations in your current or previous positions, and how would you go about engaging all segments of our community if you were selected as our next superintendent?
Both in Cass City and in Howell as superintendent, I became very involved in a service club, and been a Rotarian for many years, and joined the Rotary Club, which was a great opportunity if you're familiar with the four-way test, and it was a great opportunity to get to know some of the business community. When I came to Howell, we had a very active chamber, and so I reached out to the chamber executive and got involved in several of the festivals and programs that they were involved with. I joined a church, local church in Howell. I also reached out. They have a ministerial association that's interdenominational and represents all the clergy in the county, and so I sought them out and I met with them twice a year and just talked about concerns and issues that they saw in the community and in the schools. I developed a very good relationship with both the local editor of the paper and the owner of the local radio station, and that a lot of times, because we dealt with some very difficult issues, really paid some huge dividends. I think that one of the keys to being successful as a superintendent, you need to live in the community. I firmly believe that. I think that in addition to living in the community, you need to be extremely visible and extremely active in the community. The kids need to see you, the parents need to see you, community members need to see you engaged. Quite often when I would attend different concerts or events in Howell, for instance, the music director who's been there for 38 years told me at the last concert I was at, which was at Christmas time, he says, "You have attended more concerts in your 4.5 years here than all your predecessors since I've been here." And so I think it's important. I think that you need to become part of the community. I think you need to people need to get to know you, and not just at work, but at leisure time and other things like that. I don't know. I probably can't stress that enough, is the importance of being involved in the community, school. There's different parent organizations. There's opportunities. I was active, with our Howell Education Foundation. I was active with our sports boosters, and so I think that there's so many ways that if you really want to make a difference, you have to spend the time and be visible.
Could you share with us ways in which you have accomplished successful communications with the community regarding your district's problems or accomplishments?
Absolutely. Probably the job I had in Howell was certainly the most difficult job I've ever had, and many of you don't know this, so if I can, I'm going to answer your question, but let me, if I may, maybe put you at ease a little bit or talk about the elephant in the room, so to speak. When I went to Howell, I was the 5th superintendent in as many years. The previous 2 superintendents had been fired. I had 14 board members during a 4-year period, 14 different board members. I had a politically polarized board, and we dealt with some extremely difficult issues and some issues that were unpopular. Having to deal with a sporting coach that had been involved in some misconduct, and just a myriad of things. We had a employee that violated a student's First Amendment rights, and there was a big to-do about that. So, and it was something that, because of the relationships that I had garnered in the community, that I really believe we were able to navigate some of those areas. I have, in the course of my career, learned that it's very important to take responsibility for the decisions that you make. And there was a series of events that occurred, and of course there's always 2 or 3 sides, to every story. But there were some decisions that I had to make regarding some misconduct and some actions that I had to take, and I told my leadership team at the time that I may not survive this as your superintendent because of the political powers and things that were going on. And it's interesting because when I look at your core values, I look at honesty and know and do the right thing. And I look at responsibility, to be accountable and admit, when you've made a mistake. I look at integrity and the ability to make the right choice even when it's not popular. And then certainly courtesy, treating others the way you would like to be treated. So I guess what I would want to say is that I accept responsibility for what happened in Howell. My greatest disappointment was that I wasn't able to bring a fragmented board back together. I've served under 5 different boards during my tenure as a superintendent. Every one of the boards has given me exemplary reviews on my performance, and the last board was one that there were just differences that we couldn't overcome. And so anyways, that's kind of I hope that at least gives you a feel or a sense for what happened and how I've worked through that. So when dealing, we've had several issues. One of the things that Howell was strapped with is that we had the dubious honor of having the former head of the Ku Klux Klan lived in our school district. And so every time there was any kind of, and kids will do stupid things at times, and I had some kids, one of the last hot issues I dealt with as superintendent was a year ago during the basketball season, and we had some kids that were exchanging racially motivated tweets with students from the opposing school. And so, that blew up, and we were able to, because of our community connections, we were able to reach out and got our diversity council involved, got the other district, the superintendent from the other district involved, and actually brought a bunch of our kids and their kids together, and kind of work through this. And so I haven't, except for my time at Eagle Village, the most of the diversity that I've worked with have been diversity along the lines of economically disadvantaged and special needs kids. I primarily worked in communities that were largely white, and so I don't have probably the depth of experience dealing with different ethnic groups, but I think the basic tenets, being able to relate well and work well with people have to do with accepting that, our society, and one of the reasons our society works is because we're made up of people of different temperaments, talents, and convictions, and there's great value in that. And I think that's something that I, even in talking to Brian, one of the things that I'd ask him, I said, if I'm fortunate enough to be the next superintendent at Dearborn, are you going to be available so I can reach out now and then when I need some advice? And he kind of chuckled and said, absolutely. So.
What are some examples of community activities in which you have been an active participant and/or provided leadership, and in what ways did that benefit your district?
One of the big ones, and this is something that I didn't start, but I embraced and became very active with, is the Balloon Fest that happens in Howell every June, end of June. And it actually occurs on our grounds, on our school grounds. And it's a wonderful event that brings over 100,000 people to the community. They have a big outdoor carnival and a craft show. And once again, it's hosted right on our campus. So it was a great opportunity for us to be involved and kind of roll out the red carpet. We highlighted student programs. We had kids that were actually involved in working a lot of the different activities there. And that was one that was really positive. Another one was our Melon Festival. We have a huge Melon Festival every August. And so every year for the past 5 years, I have been downtown Howell during the Melon Festival selling melon ice cream, and which was something our Rotary Club actually had started doing. And we would harvest the melons, and we would slaughter them in the kitchen at the school, and send the fruit down to the Michigan State University dairy, and they would make the ice cream literally 2 days before the festival, so it was very fresh, and it's a great event, and it brings in a lot of music, and it's a great showcase for the community. Also, as being past president of the Rotary Club, our Rotary Club sponsors a tour to Livingston, which is one of the largest bike tours in Michigan, and it occurs second Sunday, in October every year. And I was very active in that. 1 year. And I don't know whether it was out of just wondering if a heavyset guy could ride a bicycle 12 miles or not, but there were some challenges that went up, and I did end up riding a bicycle 12 miles. And so ended up raising several $1,000s, for the United Way as a result of that. Our organization, the tour that year, generated almost $50,000 for United Way, and so that's another great event. Have been very active with the Howell Education Foundation. Our last, a year ago this past February, we had our first annual gala fundraiser where we showcased our kids and our programs and had a live auction, and ended up raising almost $90,000 in one night for our scholarships for our kids. And because of relationships with the community, I was able to call, the presidents of different, corporations and say, hey, we're doing this, and they'll say, Ron, we'll take a whole table, we'll buy a whole table. So, anyways, that's just a few of the different groups. I'm also really involved in our church. I'm on the board of trustees. My wife's a Stephen minister at our church. We are just, tonight, if I wasn't here, I would have been escorting 8 ladies at the Pink Party, which is the Susan G. Coleman Pink Party that we have every year. It's for cancer survivors and to raise money for cancer research. And the last 5 years, I've rented the Tux, and if you sign up with a group of 8 ladies, you get an escort, and most of the time it ended up being school employees that, ladies that thought it would be great to have me carry their bags around town, and that was a great event, and I am missing that tonight, but this is pretty important to me. So that's just a few of some of the different types of community events that I think were important and give back to the community.
The next questions are mine, and this is about political awareness.
Okay.
So what do you feel the superintendent's role is in influencing county and state political processes impacting K through 12 education? How have you been involved in these processes?
I think it's extremely important that the superintendent of the schools and board members are involved, in that process. When I was superintendent in Howell, we had 4 times a year meetings, breakfast meetings with our local legislators, and would talk about issues and concerns that we had. From my time in Cass City to my time in Howell, on 5 different occasions, I testified before the K-12 Appropriations Committee, and I am very active member of MASA and support their PAC. I've been on the legislative committee for MASA. I think that we have to make our voices heard, and all you have to do is look at how we're funded, in talking with Sam Barna, you can make very, very good decisions as a board and a business manager and a superintendent, but if your funding is not adequate, from the state, if the foundation grant is not adequate, it creates some huge problems. And then the other thing that's happened is several of the times I spoke had to do with unfunded mandates and things that they require, have asked the legislature has told schools or mandated that they do, and don't provide funding for it. And I think that's wrong. And I think that as part of the political process, we have a duty and a responsibility to be advocates for our district.
Thank you. What is your view of the testing assessment programs being required of all school districts by the Michigan Department of Education? Do you believe these programs help to improve academic achievement, or do they slow the instructional process? What changes, if any, do you feel need to be made?
The first part of the question is I see value in standardized testing, but I don't see value in a test that is given once a year and is used as more of a aha or gotcha type of a situation. When I was talking, and by the way, the group of young men and women that I met with before I came in here were very impressive, and the last thing I said to him, I said, I hope the board's not as hard on me as you've been. So, but anyways, one of the questions that they asked me the same question, and I said, here's my take. If you look at the MEP test, for instance, now they switched to the MyStep, which occurred this spring, but if you go back over the history of the MEP, it's been administered in October. And we don't get the results until April or May quite often. And so I told him it's kind of the equivalent of having a heart attack in October and not finding out till April or May. What am I supposed to do? I mean, so I think that system is flawed. I really love the recommendation that Brian has made to the State Department of Ed that they go to NWEA testing. It's a test that is much shorter to give. It can be administered for sure 3 times a year, and if you're running summer school, it could be administered 4 times a year. It gives you great information at the beginning of the year where your students are at. It also generates reports for parents and for teachers, as to how they can improve the deficits they're seeing, in their students. Once again, mid-year, and then at the end of the year. And so not only, and I think I agree with Brian's reasoning on this, not only is that a great tool for improving the educational process, it also is a great tool to use with your evaluation process too, and the ability, and knowledge is power, and for a teacher who's instructing kids and probably has good formative assessments, to have this test that occurs once a year and they can't see the test, they can't get the actual breakdown results of the test, they just see if their kids are proficient, level 1, 2, 3, or 4, and so I think it's fundamentally flawed, and I think that some kids don't test well. I can remember my own daughter, oldest daughter, Abby, who's a medical doctor now, she didn't do well on the MEP test in 7th grade. And but the California Achievement Test, which we administered when I was in Harrison, was nationally normed, and she was in the 98th percentile. The other thing too is that I hate the fact that there's been this roller coaster where teachers and administrators feel like they just need to teach to the test. And I think that there's much more to that, and I think that there's probably things that are brushed over and aren't covered in the depth that they need to, because people feel rushed to cover this information so that they can perform well on a standardized test.
Thank you. This question has two parts.
Okay.
What impact do you feel the Michigan Department of Education designation of focus and priority schools is having on Michigan's school districts in general? And the second question is, how are current regulations regarding dual enrollment programs impacting students and districts?
Well, from my experience on the first part of the question, the whole issue of identifying, focus schools or priority schools is flawed. And I'll give you a great example. Both this last year, both our high school and Brighton High School, which are very different districts, because Brighton only has about a 12% free and reduced lunch, and Howell had about a 37% free and reduced lunch. But both of our high schools were listed as priority schools, and it was because of a subgroup of kids. And when you get to the larger high schools, you're always going to have at least 30 kids. A lot of your smaller districts may not have enough kids to make up a subgroup, but your bigger districts absolutely do. And so I was surprised when I saw that, when I was doing my research on your district, to see that you had a high school that was a focus school. And I think that it's an unfair designation. I don't think it adequately reflects the work that's being done in the schools. And once again, I think it's a gotcha type of a moment. The other thing too is if you're a very high performing school, many times you'll have, if you have a diverse population, you're going to have some kids that are extremely high achievers, and you're going to have other kids that are cognitively impaired, or just, we have kids coming into school that coming into kindergarten that don't have the basic vocabulary and the basic skills they need to be successful in kindergarten, And so if you look at that, we need to work on closing that gap. But the way they call districts out on that, and the other thing too is if you look at try to figure out, if you're trending towards being a focus school, you almost have to be a psychometrician, to figure out if you're trending that way. And so I think that's extremely unfair. The current dual enrollment, I think that the state has made it more difficult, because here's one of the things is with the dual enrollment, the locals are paying for that, and although you may save some money, or they posture that you may save some money with staff because you've got kids that are coming out, but you don't have a whole section of kids that are coming out of a particular class, so it's created some redundancy, for districts. I'm very committed to the dual enrollment. I think it's a very, very important option, and the earlier we can get kids involved in looking at college and looking at career paths is going to make a difference. But I have a real problem. The other thing I have a problem with in terms of some of the stuff that's been coming out of Lansing has to do with some of the graduation requirements and how they apply that broadly to students with disabilities, and I think that they are doing our kids a great disservice.
Thank you.
All right, I have the next set of questions. It's going to be revolving around leadership attributes. Please describe the strategic planning process you are most comfortable with using, and share any evidence you have that the process has been successful.
Well, when I first was in Cass City and also in Howell, they didn't have a strategic plan in place, and it was more pronounced in Howell. Howell had built a $70 million second high school, and didn't have the money to open it up, and part of it had to do with some planning errors, I believe, that occurred, not having a good strategic plan. But anyways, what we looked at initially was Deming's total quality management model. and that we established, where we were and where we wanted to be, and then established a series of benchmarks and checks along the way, almost like you're taking a trip and periodically looking at the map, if I'm heading to Traverse City and I end up in Ecorse, I probably made a wrong turn, So, but that's pretty simplistic, but it really, shows the importance of having a clear direction and a way to monitor your goals towards that. And we worked through a very comprehensive a strategic plan, both in Cass City and in Howell when I was there. But what I found was this beautiful strategic plan that we put together was cumbersome and sat on the shelf. And so I don't know if you're familiar with any of Vern Harnish's work on mastering the Rockefeller principles or scaling up. But what he talks about, refers to, is a one-page strategic plan, which is rather simplistic. But what they did is, throughout the organization, they have an overarching strategic plan, format. But each individual facet of the organization has a one-page plan that kind of outlines what they're doing, by building, by department, to move towards that overarching strategic plan. And it's interesting because I'm a Courageous Journey grad through the Michigan Department of Ed and the MASA, and I'm actually presenting in 2 weeks up at Houghton Lake for a conference with 45 superintendents on just that topic, and strategic planning and using data to improve student achievement. So.
Okay, thank you. What are some examples of how you have used data and research to make important decisions in your current position?
Okay. As superintendent of Howell Public Schools 2 years ago, we were introduced to a benchmarking program called IDEX Insights. And that's who I'm currently employed by right now. But it was, to me, having been in education for 30 years, it was the first time that I had ever seen a tool that was able to allow us to benchmark our district work based on similar peer groups. And most of you are probably familiar with the book The Influencer, but in that book they talk about an affliction involving what they call the guinea worm. And the doctor who is contributing to this part of the book talks about how when the World Health Organization goes into an area where there's an epidemic, the first thing they do is look for people that are living in the same region under the same circumstances that are not being afflicted by the disease. And they call that positive deviance. And so what this benchmarking program did was that allowed us to look at districts with similar demographics, both on the geographic size, on the free and reduced lunch count, and the size of our buildings or district, and identify schools that were outperforming us. And so, much like I called Brian last summer and asked him, what are you doing to improve those ACT scores because it's working, we were able to do that, and we were able to reach out, even at the building level, we were able to reach out to other buildings that were dealing with similar populations. And it's something, to do that collaboratively with an administrative team or with a building is remarkable. And can I expand on this a little bit? Is that all right? Yeah. Get time? There's a book called The Power of the Social Brain by Pat Wilson O'Leary, and she talks about the fact that we used to believe that whatever you were born with cognitively is what you had, And so the power of the social brain is a culmination of research on brain dominance theories, and what's happened is what we know about how kids learn and how we as an organization learn and work together has really evolved. And one of the things that she calls out is that the work that's being done, that has fostered advanced technologies and advances in modern medicine, in your case Westlaw, have all come as a result of not an Einstein or a Darwin, but rather groups of people working interdependently. And so I think that there's great importance in using that kind of data and that kind of benchmarking data, because when I would go to one of the buildings and sit with in one of their staff meetings, and we would put their data up on the board, and so the first thing they'd say, well, is that really apples to apples? And so we would break it down and show them, yeah, here's the size of your building, here's your free and reduced lunch count, here's the scores, and these are buildings that have the same demographics. And so then they'd say, well, maybe it's a cohort group then. And so we'd say, well, and there was a place we'd go and look at the cohorts and see how the cohorts had done. And so it opened up a new way for us as educators to look at data and to really find data that was cogent, timely, and able to shape the work that we were doing. And I think we made better decisions because of it. We were able to use it also in our evaluation process. It helped drive our school improvement process, helped drive our district school improvement process. And so I think, data, and I'm a hunter, and I target practice a lot. And one of the things I love about shooting a weapon is I get some immediate feedback whether I'm on target or off target, It's not like that necessarily in education, so you need to have good trend data, good benchmarking data to inform, and we used it with our board, we used it with our community, and it was just an incredible opportunity and a great learning experience.
Alrighty. Given that both the Dearborn Public Schools and Henry Ford College share a common Board of Education, what unique challenges and/or opportunities do you believe are created by this relationship? And how do you see the two institutions collaborating on behalf of the students and the community?
I have not had a chance to meet the president of the college in person, Dr. Jensen, but I have talked with him. I spent about 45 minutes with him on the phone, and it was really refreshing because a lot of the questions that I had and the information that he offered made me even more eager to serve as your superintendent. Having a board, with the level of experience and not just time in the seat, but other experiences, whether it was being an instructor or a dean, whether it was working, with immigrants, or whatever the case, you guys bring a really great diversity to the table. And so in talking with Dr. Jensen, we started talking about common things, revisions, and I said, one of the innovative things I did in Howell is we started a flight program. And we partnered with a local aviation school, and we did the ground school, during the day with our kids as a class, and they did the flight school portion of that. We talked about the early college program and the whole PK-12 concept, and how that was something that could be expanded upon, and how we could look at enhancing CTE programs and STEM programs. And so I think that it's probably one of the most unique situations that I've seen. I think it's a hallmark of the district and the college to have that relationship, and I don't see anything but good things coming out of that relationship.
Great.
Just FYI, he's right behind you. Now
So
can
you
put
said
a
all the
face
right
to a
things.
name.
He's still smiling.
He's still smiling, okay.
Okay, what are the key practices needed to establish and maintain a good working relationship with the board, parents, and members of the local business community?
I think communication is probably paramount. I made a habit of every week basically doing an update or a summary for the board, in terms of the things that we're working on and things that were going on. Our cabinet meetings for our central office team which included our principals too. My administrative assistant would take minutes in that, and that would go out to all the different departments and the union chairs, and would go out to the board too. I did a series of podcasts, and I found that was very effective. We also had done a survey and found that about 70% of our parents age 40 and under were heavily involved in social media. And so we started pushing out information on things that were happening in the district, through social media. And that was very, very effective, and got lots of real positive feedback from parents on that. We also we put together a monthly newsletter that went out both when I was in Cass City and when I was in Howell. We made sure that we kept our face in front of the community, and so we did do some advertising and talking about more points of pride and things that we were really excited about that were happening in our district. I think the communication piece, and especially with the board, and this is one thing that I saw as the wheels came off, so to speak, in Howell. Each year that I was in Howell, we did a governance workshop every year, and so we would come back together and would look at basically our social contract that talked about how we were going to treat each other and how we were going to interact and not surprising each other in meetings, be prepared, treat people the way you would want to be treated. And so I think that is something that is really important. It's very important that the superintendent clearly understand, what the goals of the board is, know how you like to be communicated with. I had some board members that wanted to be, wanted phone communication. I had some that wanted email communication. I had some that wanted face-to-face communication. So, getting to know, what different board members, prefer in that regard. I think it's the same thing as you're looking out. I think back after almost 35 years of a great marriage and relationship with my best friend, that good communication is really the key, and keeping a short account with each other. And if there's problems or concerns, that we not bottle them up and wait till things, work to a head, that we deal with those on a regular basis. So.
And this is my final question, and it's kind of a long one. What is the most important ethic for a public school superintendent, and how would you apply your most important ethic if you found yourself in a situation between doing what is best for an individual, yet making sure that the values of public accountability conform to the community standards?
Mary, would you repeat that for me, please?
Yeah, it's a little confusing. What is the most important ethic for a public school superintendent? And how would you apply your most important ethic if you found yourself in a situation between doing what is best for an individual, yet making sure that the value of public accountability and conforming to community standards? I didn't write it.
I was almost going to say, cut to the chase and tell me what you really want to know.
I'm just reading it.
I think that integrity, is something that's very, very important. And, I look over my life, I've served on the hospital board when I was in Cass City and the United Way board. I was, have served on the Rotary board and am past president. I mentioned earlier I serve on the board of trustees in our church, and people who are devoid of integrity don't get those opportunities. And so I think integrity is really important. I think that as far as dealing with an individual and wanting to make sure that the laws and the rules are followed. I think that it's not a fine line. It's not necessarily black or white. I think sometimes there are gray areas. And I think when I think about integrity, and one of the things that I kind of say tongue in cheek is that you can question my intelligence, but don't question my integrity. So when I look at problems, and I didn't even go through all the issues. I'll tell you, one that was really difficult to deal with. I had in Howell, I had a board member that was caught in a sting by the sheriff department for soliciting and pandering, and they had him dead to rights, and the local paper FOIA'd the recordings, and you could go on the website and hear this board member's voice, and so it was a difficult situation, knowing that I serve at the pleasure of 7 board members, but I still had to go and have a tough conversation, with this gentleman, and it was very difficult, but it's one of those crucial conversations that you periodically have to have as a superintendent, and so.
I really don't want to have
What's that?
We're not planning on
skip
those
it
kinds of
periodically
conversations.
here.
Okay, all right. That kind of what I'm getting at is that each situation is different, and I remember talking to this board member, and I said, they didn't charge you, you can't, this is not something that there's going to be necessarily a recall on, but, for the sake of our district, because we were just getting, every board meeting, he wasn't showing up, but every board meeting we're coming and dressing us all down, and I said, for the good of the district, for the good of our kids, for the good of our community, please resign and let us appoint somebody and move past this, and he did. So it was certainly, the gentleman was old enough to be my dad, and it was a tough conversation. So.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to ask a couple of questions on instruction and curriculum. So the first one is, please give us examples of educational change or reform that you have initiated that improved success for all students.
The first thing that I did as an administrator that I thought really had a profound effect, I was principal of Harrison Middle School, and we were a failing building at that time, and we were working with the Department of Ed, and just had some real big problems. And so I started looking. I'd just taken over mid-year as principal in that building, and so we got together with our ISD and wrote a comprehensive reform demonstration grant, and we're able to bring in about $250,000 to be used for professional development of our staff. And so in doing that, we really became immersed in best practice and looking at particularly what Rick DeFore was authoring. And one of the things that Rick DeFore did a really nice job and really was a game changer for us is he talked about the 3 corollary questions that need to be addressed, if you're going to be successful in educating kids. And the first one is we need to be clear on what we expect kids to know by grade, by course, and by unit. And that is essentially your curriculum, okay? The second corollary question was, how are we going to know when kids are learning? And that has to do with both your formative and summative assessments. And even to the extent where we developed common assessments so that we didn't have to wait for the MEP to come along to inform us on how our kids were doing. The last piece of that was having a good pyramid of interventions. So once we've identified that a student is struggling academically, we kind of, okay, here's the prognosis, now what's the prescription for that? And so we became very prescriptive, in addressing and identifying kids that were struggling academically. And we saw some huge gains, and we went in a period of 2 years from being a failing district or failing building to an exemplary building. And then when I went to Cass City, they had some pretty significant issues with their curriculum. Their curriculum wasn't fully aligned. We had an incredible teaching staff, but we had some huge gaps in our curriculum. And so because of the fact that I'd been Cass City didn't have a curriculum director, the superintendent was, so I was able to work collaboratively, with our building school improvement teams and curriculum committees and do some things. We did some curriculum mapping and we're able to, realign our curriculum. And it was interesting, even after 5 years of me being gone, as recently as a year ago, they were still identified as a district to watch because they were outperforming, based on their demographics, they were outperforming their peers. When I went to Howell, we saw they were doing some great things in math and reading, but we had some big gaps in math, or in writing and science. And so once again, we first went to that curricular piece, and it was really, for me, it was kind of interesting because that was the first time I'd worked, with a sizable district, and it was half the size of Dearborn, but it was the biggest district that I had worked in to date. And so I very quickly learned that I couldn't do it myself, and that I needed to delegate, and I needed to work collaboratively. And that was really key. And I remember we had in the middle school math area, we had some real disconnects. And so I brought in some middle school math teachers. We looked at the data and had some conversations. And I said, what do you think needs to change? And I can still remember, one of the teachers who was nearing retirement got teary-eyed. She says, "No one's ever asked us," And I said, "Well, shame on them. They should have," And so anyways, we made some great gains. If you look at our MEP scores, and of course, I haven't been in the district since November, but if you look at our MEP scores from last year or from when I came in 2010, all of a sudden you'll see 11, 12, 13, you'll see our scores just start taking off. And that was not, I played a role in that, but the people that really made the difference, were my staff, that really, were able to work collaboratively and given the opportunity to be part, of the decision-making process and serve produce some great rewards for our district.
So I just want to jump in. We have 10 more questions and about 20 minutes left in this portion of the meeting.
Please describe your experience with providing quality educational programs for students at all achievement levels. What role should small learning communities play, if any?
Yeah, I think small learning communities are important. I think that what you guys have done with your magnet school, is a great example of that, and being able to identify kids that maybe need some additional help or are struggling, and then giving them the help that they need. It's interesting because I came up, in the CTE programs, and when I was at Eagle Village, most of the kids I was working with were special needs students. And so very quickly began to recognize that not only technology, but providing kids opportunities to do something that they can be good at, and helping them find things that they're good at, and nurturing that is a great equalizer, and provides, there's a lot of strength in that. So I think that we just, we need to educate every student, and I love it, and when you look at your mission, vision, and values, you talk about, educating every student, and I think that's important, that we don't let kids, fall through the cracks. Myself, I struggled in school up until I was almost in high school, and I had a coach that took a great interest in me, and actually he was the one that discovered that I'm dyslexic, and was able to get me some help, and it really changed my life. And had it not been for this coach and teacher, I probably never would have gone to college, and certainly wouldn't be a superintendent. So.
What is your view on the role and importance of student personal portfolios and the role that individual educational plans should play as part of the overall system of curriculum, instruction, and assessment?
I look at it the same way that I looked at when I went to college, in terms of developing a plan, starting, here's where I am right now, and here's where I want to be, and these are the classes that I need to take and the preparation I need along the way. And I think that there's some great benefit to that. I am, keenly aware, of the needs in terms of counselor or guidance people to work with kids, to be able to do that. But getting kids to take more responsibility, for their education. One of the things that I had talked with Dr. Jensen about was Bramante's work and going from time-based to competency-based, you know, and there's a lot of kids that are involved in programs outside of the day, and if we can look for ways to extend, you know, credit to them, you know, it's a great opportunity and keeps those kids engaged, and so they're constantly looking at things that they're doing, not only inside of school but outside of school, and trying to see that connection there. And
How would you go about evaluating the effectiveness of the curriculum, teaching methods, and assessments used in our district?
well, I have spent some time, you know, reviewing, but I mean, from the outside, it's a lot different looking from the outside than looking, you know, from the inside. I think that you know, part of my first 90 days, you know, would be to really dig into that and have a chance to meet, you know, with the curriculum director and your, you know, building principals and support people, and really have a chance to talk with them and look at the data, you know, and look at what their thoughts are on it. You know, once I have a chance to get in and kind of review, you know, I would then, you know, at the end of my 90 days, come back to the board with some recommendations, or at least with findings, and proposing some things that we might want to look at or work on. But it's so hard. I know it's so hard to you know, especially a district, you know, the size and as diverse as Dearborn. For me, even though I've, you know, spent several days talking to people in the community and researching, you know, it's so hard to, from the outside, say, well, I think we would do this and we would do that. So it's really need to get to know the district. So.
Thank you.
The next couple of questions are mine, and they're in the area of finances and operations. Please describe your experience with budget development and financial management.
Okay. In addition to being an educator, I also had a construction business, and ran that up until, I believe, 93, and had to work, you know, within budgets, you know, but my first real in-depth opportunity to get into budgeting was when I became a building principal in terms of academic budgeting. And we had a new business manager who decided that each local building was going to be responsible for developing their budget, you know, and he gave us parameters, you know, and so that was a great experience. When I went to Cass City, as I mentioned, I was the superintendent and the business manager, and so developed a very deep understanding. During my time there, prepared, I went through 5 budget cycles, you know, when I was in Cass City. Because I had to preside over a deficit district my first year as superintendent and business manager, gained a very quick education, became a very quick study of, you know, things that you don't want to do or things that you want to avoid doing, and one of them was avoid going and being a deficit district, because the paper chase that follows and the requirements for reporting are just terribly burdensome. But I think that in my time, unless I've been overruled, you know, by the people that I report to, you know, we have been very good about recommending and setting forth a balanced budget, living within our means, and I think that is important. I think, you know, it doesn't make any difference whether it's you know, it's at home or at school or at work. You can't spend more than you take in.
In tough financial times, how do you set priorities when there are competing interests, such as the need to implement programs for struggling students and also keep programs for gifted students?
Okay. The first time I had to deal with that, like I said, was in Cass City, and because we were a deficit district, I had to cut 15% out of our budget, and so they had been making cuts over time, so much of the low-hanging fruit, you know, was already, you know, trimmed. So what I did is I brought all, including our union membership, I brought all my different departments in, all the buildings in, and I said, I need ideas. I need to look for cuts that will have the least impact on student achievement. And I said, I really want to avoid as much as possible making cuts. And if we do, you know, I want to be equitable, so I'm not going to, cut, our needy kids or our gifted and talented kids, but it's going to be somewhat, uniform. And it was really a neat experience because they, the kind of the people with the boots on the ground, so to speak, came back to me and identified things that they could cut that they believed would have the least impact on student achievement. And those were the cuts that I took to the board, and those were the cuts that we actually implemented. And it was so neat because those staff members and those department heads had been involved in that process. We didn't have to fight, or it was just, it was a very smooth transition because they had a say. They played an active role, and they had insight, that I didn't have, because of the scope of their job and their time and their position, So I think that's probably, if I was faced with that situation again, I think I would probably handle it the same way.
Lastly, describe the extent of your experience in managing facilities and district operations.
Have a great understanding, even though we did a lot of residential construction, I did a lot of commercial construction also. And so when I was in Cass City, we had passed a bond issue, and we did it on our first try by a 2/3 majority. And had a chance to work, with the architects and also with the construction management people as we worked through the project and, staged the project. So I probably have a better understanding. I maintained my builder's license and had done some speculative building right up until 2005. So, I have a very good understanding. I can read blueprints. I kind of have a good understanding of how much time certain projects should take and the planning that goes into that. So, like I said, I think that I have probably a better understanding than most of my colleagues in that realm.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you questions related to staff and personnel. How would you hold individual school sites and central office staff accountable for results?
Well, the first thing I would do is I made sure that they understood, the direction that we were heading, and they actually, participated in that process. The second thing I did is make sure that they had the tools and the materials they needed in order to move forward with that. And then the third piece that I did is I set up a period or a series of checks where we would periodically review progress towards goals. And it served me well both in both the districts I've been a superintendent in. I think that how you handle your staff is as important or more important than how you handle almost any other part of your operation, because I really believe that your human resources are some of your most valuable resources.
Please share your experience in working with employee groups, unions at all levels. Tell us how your working relationships have produced positive results for students.
Okay. I had a great relationship with all four of the union presidents, in my last district, and had a good relationship with the union presidents and leadership when I was in Cass City also. I think that I still remember they had such, when I came to Howell, they had such a history of this adversarial type of negotiating, and so first thing I started doing was having lunch or breakfast once a month with the union president, and had a chance of our largest union. The other ones I did it more informally over coffee, but we usually had a lot of issues to talk about, so I would do it over a lunch or a breakfast. But it was a great experience, and so because I was listening to the whispers, I didn't have to listen to the screams later, and I think that was a real positive experience. But I can still remember when the union president came to me and they were ready to start negotiating, and I looked him in the eye and I said, Jay, there's two ways that we can do this. We can beat each other up and play this out in the newspaper and be nasty and then come together and work collaboratively and sign a contract, or we can forego all the unpleasantries, come together, work collaboratively, and get a contract. And that's what they chose. And so, it was an incredible experience for me. And it's interesting because not only, did I find myself respected by them, but I almost became, a family. And to the extent where our board president, or not board president, but our union president, had a child here this last summer, even though it was after I left Howell. He's sending me pictures, and so I think those relationships are pretty important. The other thing is we were at a point last spring in the negotiation process where things were starting to come apart. And I had a lead negotiator, and he called me at home at 11 o'clock at night and said, "Ron, you got to come up here." He said, "The wheels are coming off." And so I was able to walk in. I asked the union president and vice president to come down to my office for a minute and talk, and we just had a really great heart-to-heart talk, because they were already picking up their stuff. They were ready to go to fact finding, and because of the relationship that I had with that union president and his membership, I said, let's work on this. Let's get this resolved. Come on back down. And so we resolved it. I was there till 2:30 in the morning. We got a TA that night. So. That relationship piece is extremely important.
What is your philosophy regarding effective professional development for teachers and principals? And what role should professional learning communities play, if any?
I think professional learning communities goes back to what I spoke about earlier about the power of the social brain by Pat Wilson O'Leary, and the ability to work collaboratively and with your peers and to improve your practice. And so the professional learning communities piece, I'm a very strong advocate of that. I think I think of a study that was done out on the East Coast that was in JAMA here. It's been about 15 years ago, but it covered a group of thoracic surgeons that agreed over a 3-year period that they were going to observe each other in surgery, and compare notes. And what was interesting is after this trial period, it was a 1-year period they did that, and in the ensuing 3 years, they reduced collectively their mortality rate by 35%. And so I shared that with my staff. I said, if a group of physicians, can come together and show improvements, and these are highly specialized, positions, imagine how we as educators coming together and can learn from each other and improve, the outcome for our kids.
In your current position, how much time do you spend in schools, in the classroom, and in the community? And what value has that been to you?
I probably, of course, when I was superintendent in Howell, I probably spent 60% of my time in the buildings and either in the schools or in the community. I made a point of getting through every building, and we had a rotation, and I would get through every building at least every 6 weeks. And I would usually go and spend the majority of a day in each building, and we would do a walkthrough, and I'd spend some time in the teacher's lounge and have a chance to interact with staff. Quite often, when we would have parent-teacher conferences, I'd schedule so I could try to hit 2 or 3 of those. And the other thing, when in a big district, you have so many events going on too, it's important. So a lot of times I'd go and I'd be at one school for the first quarter of a game, and then at another one for the second quarter, and just so parents saw me and had access too. So I think did I answer that for you? Did I
Yes,
cover
you
that?
did.
It's helpful when they play each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how. Yeah. Where do you sit?
Good point. Okay, so we're at the point now where we have time available for you to ask us any questions that you might have. Be gentle.
All right. One of the questions, I love reflective inquiry type questions, and so, let's say I'm the person you pick, just theoretically, and a year has passed, and someone asks you, what kind of job Ron Wilson has done as superintendent of Dearborn Schools, and you're able to give me just a glowing review, what would I had to have accomplished during that first year to merit such a review?
Sounds like one of your questions.
I thought I said to be gentle. I think that, oh, I'm sorry,
No,
did
no,
you?
go ahead. Go.
I think that in, our district is in a good position, and I think that at this point, we probably could have an average Joe at the helm, and we would steer the course.
Sure.
Because we have good people in place. We have great teachers, we have great administrative staff, our cabinet is they're in their groove right now. I want to see us move forward. I want to see us move forward faster than we've been moving before. I think that we're at the beginning of a race and we've built up momentum. And what was it, 12 miles you rode? I think we're at like mile 11. Okay. And we need to pull ahead a little bit. And so I want to see us make some strides, some big strides that gets everybody excited. You know, when you have success and that success is kind of constant and it's moving and it's going in the right direction, but something happens and then everybody gets excited and everybody starts moving a little bit faster and a little
Sure.
bit faster. And that's what I would like to see, to give you a glowing review. Trustee Bezzi?
Along with that, what I think is another important thing is we are a very diverse district. And a person such as yourself taking the initiative to learn about different, the diversity in this district, go out to the different communities, learn about the communities' ethnic differences as well as the economic and social differences. I think that anybody in a position of superintendent in the Dearborn Public Schools, for me to give a glowing review on top of what Trustee Shellis has indicated, that would be very important for me to see. So.
Trustee
Well,
Petlicoff?
I guess what, we still continue, as much as we have put together innovative programs for these numbers of years, we still have not done the best job of spreading that news outside of our community. And I think that what we really need to do is to promote ourselves in a big way and to make sure that we're recognized for all of the things that we do offer to our community.
Even within our community.
Yeah, and that we do it in a way that gets noticed.
Sure.
You got almost half of us. That's
Well,
pretty
and
good.
that's I didn't necessarily expect everyone to respond. You know, I really, you know, I feel like I've done a very, you know, thorough job on researching the district. So, you know, most of the questions, the real burning questions, have already been answered. So,
Well, that's
so-
good. That shows you some of our transparency. That,
Yes.
a point of pride, I might add, because I have looked at other districts' websites, and it's not as easy to research information as it is in Dearborn.
I don't know whose idea it was on the video that's on there. It's just incredible.
That was mine.
Actually, all the good things were his idea.
We were impressed. My wife and I turned it on. We're standing in the kitchen. We're just glued to it. So.
Anything incredible is usually my idea.
Okay, all right.
He's the architect behind
I
all
was-
the
yeah.
incredible ideas. We do have a couple of audience questions,
Okay.
so I will read them. This is from Adib Musa. He says, you mentioned that one of Dearborn Public Schools' main challenges is the gap between schools. What strategies would you implement to narrow or close the gap?
Well, I think, you know, part of it is you know, looking at, you know, the programs that you have in place, because, you know, I have to imagine that some of those differences could be because you have students that where English is a second language. You know, I mean, you have to really look for those root causes. And so, you know, one of the first things that I would want to do is do some benchmarking on the individual buildings, you know, and find comparables, you know, and find out what they're doing to close that gap. But there are some very, you know, I mentioned those 3 corollary questions that DeFore talked about, and if you are adequately answering those 3 corollary questions, many of those achievement issues will start to go away. The other thing, and this is paramount, and I think Brian has done a good job of stressing this too, is that early literacy. If kids come out of 3rd grade reading, writing, and computing at grade level, their chances of being identified as learning disabled or having problems later are greatly diminished. So I think you got 2 things. You got kids that are coming in that may be behind, that need to be caught up. We really need to focus on that. You may have kids that are coming in that are older, that because they don't speak the language, or because of family issues or whatever, need some additional help. And I'm the oldest of 8 kids, and I can tell you right now, not one of us are the same, so you really have to adjust and to make things work.
The next question is from Yasmin Ferris. Our district has a long-term vision. If chosen for this position, how long do you see yourself leading our district?
I would like to work, Lord willing, for 6 more years. At least in the capacity as a superintendent. I think after that I have some interest in maybe teaching at the college level or being involved in teacher preparation. But like I said, I'm 54 years old, and I'd like to work at least until I'm 60. And if I have a good solid board and I turn 60 and the work is still fun and exciting, then I would look at that a little bit differently probably, but at least 6 more years.
And the next question is from William Ali. Our district is made up of 60% Arab American students. What experience from your past jobs do you have in dealing with the Arab American community?
That's a tough one, and I kind of alluded to that too. I really haven't had an opportunity to work with Arab populations. In somewhat of a cursory fashion. We had friends. We had the Jabaras in Ludington were good friends of ours growing up, but unfortunately, I've been pretty much in small rural districts in northern Michigan, and you just don't have the ethnic diversity that you have. And for me, I'm looking forward to an opportunity, because. I just find, I think back when I was a kid, my folks were very, very good about exposing their kids to different things, and every year we had a different ethnic celebration where we would do a meal and would invite friends from different ethnic groups into our home and cook different foods and different experiences, and I just found that to be very enriching. And so I think that there's some great opportunities here, and but it's probably, I'm a pretty quick study, and I think that some of the comments about, getting out into the community and meeting with different ethnic groups and civic groups and things like that are going to really give me some fodder to make some improvements and come up to speed very quickly. I think that one of the things in my 90-day plan is I would want to set up a superintendent's advisory committee or critical friends groups, and I would try to pick people from the different ethnic groups that represent the community and make sure that they're represented there, and because I want to hear what they have to say.
Excellent. So we still have some time left. I just want to make sure that we give you the opportunity to cover anything that up to this point you haven't had an opportunity to cover, or any final words that you want to leave us with.
Well, first, I guess I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and regardless of what happens, I felt honored to be chosen to interview in the 3rd largest district in the state, in a district that has accomplished the things that you have accomplished. I remember I told Jackie Lovejoy earlier today, that this district and this community, from my perspective, has become the gold standard, for communities with diverse populations, and because, you don't have to look very far down the road from here to see districts that aren't experiencing the level of success that Dearborn is experiencing, and I think that's a real positive thing. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Andy Andrews' book, The Butterfly Effect. But there's a story in there, and I think that if you'll indulge me for a moment, I think it really speaks volumes to the work that you've done here, and kind of the feeling that I get, from this community. About 10 years ago, there was there was a news station that used to do a Man of the Week, and in this week in particular, they chose a gentleman named Norman Borlaug. And because Norman had received the Nobel Peace Prize and was credited in saving over 2 billion lives. And so what Norman Borlaug had done is he had found a way to hybridize corn and wheat so it would grow in arid climates, consequently saving, it would grow in all different regions, and ultimately saving 2 billion lives. But then Andrews, in his book, begs the question. He says, was it really Norman Borlaug that saved those lives, or was it really Henry Wallace, who was vice president at the time when Borlaug was a young man, and he hired Borlaug to set up a station in Mexico to hybridize corn and wheat to grow in arid climates? And so, the question was, well, should it not be Wallace as the Man of the Week? And so they said, but wait a minute, maybe it was George Washington Carver who, as a young student, his dairy professor would allow him to take his young son on forays to understand and study plants and the importance of those, and that young man was Wallace, was this vice president. Or was it really two farmers from Missouri, Susan Carver and her husband, and Moses, and they lived in a non-slave state at a time where there were states around them that were slave states, and they fell subject to the mercy of Quantrell raiders one night. These psychopaths that came and killed and burned their barn and grabbed Mary Washington, and she wouldn't release her infant child, and drag them off. And so Susan, who's Moses' wife, was great friends with George Carver's mother, or George Washington Carver's mother, and so she made arrangements. They sent news out to the local farms and areas that they were willing to make a trade and pay money to get these people back. And so Moses rode 2 hours, across the state line, and met at a crossroads, and 4 of Quantrell's raiders came up with their bags on their heads and the eyes cut out, and in exchange for the only horse, the last horse that George had, or Moses had on his farm, threw him a gunny sack, and Moses quickly opened the gunny sack, and here was the baby, nearly dead. And he picked up this baby, and he tucked it in next to his skin, and he walked through the night and through into the next morning back to his home, and all along telling this child, that he was going to give him his name and educate him and honor his mother. And so that's how George Washington Carver, saved the lives of 2 billion people and counting. And so the reason I tell that story, and I think that there's a merit in telling stories because it's one way to get a point across, and I think that the work that you have done, as a board, as a community, relationships with the college, and I mean, it goes on and on, but, I'm wondering when the story is told about Dearborn, how far are they going to have to go back to find the person who was really responsible for this whole thing? And I think that you all make a difference, you all play an important role, and so I thought I would share that with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your interest in the position of superintendent, just some formalities. The board is interviewing a total of 4 candidates, and we expect to conduct our second interviews next week, and we will let you know in a timely manner when we make our decision.
You're not going to do it on the night they have Taste of Dearborn, are you?
I've already requested that we didn't.
What day is that?
Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm out of town Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Right, so maybe Thursday then?
Yeah.
Because I have a standing invitation, that's why I was,
It's
I
a
think
great
you're-
event.
yes, I heard.
That's Jackie, always selling something.
Absolutely.
Well, we appreciate you coming and spending some time with us today.
Thank you.
For the audience, we're going to take a short break, just to let us walk around a little bit, and then we'll be